when we access these states, there's a part of our psyche that once that egoic, part of ourselves that you mentioned is sort of like, hey, you could take a back seat for a moment, like I got this, right? That there's some other part of ourselves that can come forth. And he called it the inner healer. Now, some people call it an inner intelligence, an inner wisdom. I think yesterday when we were talking, you called it an inner creator, right?
Yeah.
Some people might interpret that as a connection to source or God or a higher power, a higher self, even. To me, I don't think what you call it matters as much as just acknowledging that there's something that's happening, right? And that when we get out of the driver's seat from the ego perspective and allow this other part of ourselves to come forward, that it accelerates healing and growth.
Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art.
Good day, listeners. This is CJ Miller, and you're listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Um, Kind of a busy morning today, but I have a really neat guy that I want to talk to you about. And as you know, I always bring in my own personal business, right? When we do these podcasts, the reason I love doing a podcast so much is I am learning as I go about new techniques, new modalities, and I'm always discovering something new. And that's what's so wonderful about being a podcast host. You learn as you go. Well, here's something I've discovered that I had no idea existed before. I've been going to yoga for like 10 years, and I have discovered, I didn't know this, that there's such a thing as a breathwork facilitator. So I'm really excited to unpack this, and I'm looking forward to introducing you to Jonathan Schecter. And he is an integration specialist whose work is centered on combining breath work, nervous system regulation, and grounded exploration into altered states of consciousness that helps individuals connect to their inner holotropic wisdom. And that's a new word for me, folks, holotropic. So I'm excited to unpack that. He also has his own podcast called The Vital Point. I would encourage you to check it out. I've already listened to several episodes. Very informative. But good morning, Jonathan. How are you?
Hey, CJ, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
I am excited. I constantly am learning new things. I can't believe that I've taken yoga for 10 years. And of course, in yoga, we focus on breathing. And I say that to a point, you
Sure.
know. And then I had an appointment this morning with a physical therapist, and I'm telling her about you. And I
Uh-huh.
said, Did you? And it's amazing, right? Everybody's in their own little funnel.
That's
And
right.
I told her, I said, "Did you know there's such a thing as a breathwork specialist?" And she here she's doing holistic, right? She's doing massage therapy. She's doing and she's like, "Really?"
Yeah.
So so tell me how did you get into it and why?
Initially, I got into it through what I call the gateway drug of breathwork, a man named Wim Hof, who many of your listeners have probably heard of. He's that crazy Austrian guy that like climbed Everest wearing his shorts,
Oh,
and part of his method is, it's sort of this three-part system of breathwork, ice baths, cold plunging, and mindset. And so initially, I wasn't even interested in the breath work. I was interested in the cold plunging because I was going through a rather uncomfortable divorce. And there was like one day where I heard three different times. Like I read it one place and then I saw it on Instagram and then I was listening to a podcast all in one day. And they were all saying the same thing, which was uh, you should do ice baths because if you voluntarily do hard things, it makes the things that you don't have any choice over that are hard even easier. And I was like, I can't think of anything harder than going through this divorce right now. So if this helps me get through that, great. And I started doing cold plunging. And then on the side, there was like this breath work thing. And I was like, yeah, this is, this sounds too good to be true. But I also remembered my dad. I remember my dad sitting me down when I was a teenager, and I wasn't the most well behaved kid. I had been getting in trouble with the law and, doing things that are definitely illegal, as far as, some substances. And he tried to sit me down and say, look, I know that you think that you know what you're doing and you want to explore, psychedelics and things like that, but you can get way higher doing breath work and meditation. And when I was a kid, I said, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like, what do you know, old man? And but I remembered that he had said that, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I should give it a try. And I did, and I had a really profound experience right off the bat. And then that just sort of led me into exploring it more as I blossomed into this next chapter of my life, which was, post divorce. How do I work on myself? What do I want to this next, the next chapter to be like? Right. I knew that I definitely didn't want to repeat everything that I had just been through. So, yeah, it just became this exploration into self and a doorway into my own inner work. And one thing, continued to lead to another, led to another. I ended up doing a session online with someone named Michael Stone. And Michael Stone created neurodynamic breath work, which I can go into more if needed. Um, but I had such a great experience. I mean, it was actually one of the most challenging breathwork experiences I had ever had because it was everything that I wanted in the breathwork, and it also was something that I had been trying to figure out, how do I recreate this? Like, I can sit in my room and play music and do my own breathwork, but, like, what if I wanted to share this with somebody else? How would I do that? I had no idea. And when I went through his session, it was like everything in my head, everything that I had envisioned, everything that I wanted to sort of manifest was being presented to me, and I was the participant. And I was like, oh, wow, other people are doing this. This is great. And so I sent him an email afterwards and I expressed how grateful I was and what a profound experience it had been. And he said, oh, I'm really glad that you liked it. We're starting our first facilitator training in about a month. And I signed up on the spot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how long is this session? This session with him, how long was that?
The neurodynamic sessions, the breathing is a little over an hour. There's like an introduction. You sort of talk about what can happen, what the experience is like, at least the potential of what can come up, because it's a pretty broad spectrum of what can happen. And then there's like a relaxation sort of meditation to help the nervous system settle, to get the body and mind prepared for this experience. And then you go into the breath work. It's about an hour. And then there's an integration period afterwards where it depends what type of breath work you're doing. Sometimes it's just giving the participant some space to journal or just to land. With holotropic breath work specifically, there's an art component that is baked into the integration. Typically, when you go to a retreat, there's an art room that's set up with all kinds of supplies, and they give you what they call a mandala, which is
Yeah.
essentially just a piece of paper with a circle on it. And
Mhm.
then you get to just do whatever you want there. And so some people are very, detailed and like very artistic and, very symbolic. Oh, I saw this in my journey, this and that. Other people, it's much more abstract. They might just do watercolors or, something just to allow the brush or the pen to move on the paper and help to keep you in that other side of the brain where you're not thinking so logically and linearly, but just encouraging that other brain activity.
So what I'm hearing, and this is probably new to several of my listeners too, is that when you do this breath work, it sort of changes your state, perhaps.
Mhm. Yeah,
S-
absolutely.
So I want to. This is you talk about synchronicity. So I had an 8 a.m. Physical therapy meeting, and I grabbed I'm reading this book. I don't know if you've ever read her. She's a Buddhist teacher.
Mm-mm.
And I just flipped it open. I swear to God, I walked into the waiting room and I flipped it open. And this is the first thing I read. It talks about purification of the body temple. And it says this: it's true that certain activities, such as Sufi whirling, ecstatic dance, repetitive deep breathing, long distance running, advanced yogic postures, and long periods of fasting can temporarily switch off the mechanism of the egotic mind, and allow a glimpse of your unbounded essential nature. I swear, I was like,
That's right.
so is that what you're doing? Is you're tell me about
I'll
that.
I'll add more to your synchronicity, okay?
Okay.
If you look at the words for breath in Greek, in Sanskrit, in Chinese, in Hebrew, four pretty ancient, languages and cultures, right? The word for breath and spirit is the same in each of those languages. So there's something there that we're just rediscovering now in the modern world that our ancestors knew. And that is that the breath is one really potent doorway between the conscious and unconscious, between the body and mind, between the body and the spirit, right? So yeah, to frame this in the work of Stanislav Grof that created holotropic breathwork, he talks about how these non-ordinary states of consciousness, some of them that you just mentioned, the whirling Sufis,
Right.
prayer, meditation. It could be, more deprivation, right? Like the Native American vision quests, or sweat lodges, right? But and definitely the breath. That these help us access non-ordinary states of consciousness. You could call it an altered state, you could call it an expanded state of consciousness, but that when we access these states, there's a part of our psyche that, once that egoic, part of ourselves that you mentioned is sort of like, hey, you could take a back seat for a moment, like I got this, right? That there's some other part of ourselves that can come forth. And he called it the inner healer. Now, some people call it an inner intelligence, an inner wisdom. I think yesterday when we were talking, you called it an inner creator, right?
Yeah.
Some people might interpret that as a connection to source or God or a higher power, a higher self, even. To me, I don't think what you call it matters as much as just acknowledging that there's something that's happening, right? And that when we get out of the driver's seat from the ego perspective and allow this other part of ourselves to come forward, that it accelerates healing and growth, right? So Stan called this holotropic, and holotropic means orienting or moving towards wholeness, in the same way that heliotropic is the way that the plant moves towards the light, right? It doesn't matter where
Ah,
I put the
okay.
doesn't matter where I put the plant in the room, it's going to go towards the light, right? And so our inner healer, this part of our psyche, is constantly moving towards wholeness. And these non-ordinary states help to accelerate that process, right? That way, it doesn't matter whether you're a whirling Sufi or a Buddhist meditator, or, someone that's going down to the jungle and, sitting with ayahuasca or breath work, right? It's all helping the spirit move towards wholeness, move towards this, higher state.
It's fascinating. So my journey started with art, making art, and I realized that there was a place in making art where I feel connected to that what you're talking of,
Yeah.
creative intelligence. And so then I went backwards and I was like, well, how do I get there?
Mm.
And I turn off judgment and all this. And I never really thought about, I do meditation on my retreats. I will walk people in. I kind of try to create a place where I slowly guide them into that state, you
Yeah.
know. So we get up in the morning and I'll do a visualization or a meditation. Never done breath work, which I think is fascinating. But I will tell you one thing I did, I started watching myself. And I noticed that when I felt something good, and I don't know if I like the word good, but when I felt something of love, when I felt something good, that a thought went through my mind, I would yawn.
Mm,
I
mhm.
I I would go, and I almost put that in my book, telling people, be aware that when you yawn, you are moving toward something. You're moving toward a higher truth.
Yeah, I mean, yawning is connected to our autonomic nervous system. And typically when we're yawning, it's a sign that we're moving into the parasympathetic, which, you know, could be described as the rest and digest system. Like if you think about our nervous system as the system that's there to help us be safe, right? Like we used to be out, you know, on the plains or like, you know, out in caves, right? Hunting and gathering and in a much more life and death survival sort of struggle than we are today. Um,
Maybe.
the
Yeah, go
hopefully, right? Yeah.
ahead.
But the nervous system was designed to help us deal with that, help us deal with possible danger, right? So when we're out and we're in that, you know, hunting sort of, you know, survival mode, bringing more access to the parts of the body that are required for survival. Like for instance, I live in Arizona, right? So there's lots of things that are a little bit dangerous when I go outside, things like snakes and scorpions and things like that. If I was to walk outside right now and there was a snake, it would be natural that my system would get startled, that and I might start to feel a little bit anxious, right? Like what happens when you get startled? Your breath gets a little bit faster, your heart's racing a little bit more. All that is that survival system kicking in and saying, okay, there's a danger here. Do you want to fight it or do you want to run away from it? Right? And so if either way, there's more, I'm bringing in more oxygen and my heart's beating faster to bring that blood into the parts of my body that are needed to defend myself or to run away, right? There's more blood going into my limbs. Um, there's also things that are happening on a very subconscious level that I don't have to worry about, right? Like my digestion system starts to go offline because, hey, if I'm gonna be in this life or death scenario, like digesting the sandwich I ate an hour ago doesn't really matter. Um, so you see this with people with, you know, sort of trauma in their back in their history is, you know, digestive issues, issues with sexual function, oftentimes because again, there's another system that's not essential for immediate survival. Now, when the danger is over, when we've, you know, either fought or fled that potential danger, there's another system that comes back online that says, "Hey, you're safe now." It's okay to rest, to eat, to be more socially engaged and active. And the yawning is a part of that. That's a sign that that parasympathetic, that rest and digest system, is coming back online. And
Huh.
typically, we're a little bit more socially open, and like you said, a little bit more creative as well, right?
Yeah, that's
It's like there's
fascinating.
a internal Maslow's hierarchy of needs inside of us, right? Like it's hard to be creative when you're worried about survival in the moment.
Yeah. And I think today more than, we've always said that I've heard that we talk about that analogy. I've heard that analogy before about how, well, we're not being eaten by a lion, but in a weird way we are. Social media has made it that we're constantly bombarding our system with flight or fight.
Absolutely. The system has, from an evolutionary perspective, the system hasn't adapted to the modern day, right? And here's the thing, and you can touch this this principle in meditation as well, is that the mind doesn't always know whether a threat is real or not. And it's going to treat that perceived threat in the same way that it's going to treat a real threat. Like to go back to my example of the snake, if I was to walk into this room right now and it's dark and there's a rope, you know, in the middle of the room, for a moment I might think it's a snake and I'm going to respond in the same way physiologically, right? Until I realize, oh shoot, it's just a rope. There's nothing to be afraid of. right? So a couple hundred years ago, we were getting less information throughout our entire lives as we're exposed to on a daily basis now, right? So the nervous system hasn't quite adapted to the amount of stimulus that we're being bombarded with every day through social media, through our access to media in general. And
Hmm.
what is so much of that doing? It's saying, be afraid, be angry, buy this so that you're not afraid or angry, right? Like
Right.
all these different things. So yeah, I don't think we've quite caught up to the modern day situation that we're in, and I don't think we're going to catch up anytime soon. So
No.
so it makes these practices, being able to connect to a more relaxed, calm, maybe a space where you can be yawning, even more important, right? Because we are under so much more stress, and all this is like we're still on a pretty surface level. Like when we start to talk about the way that we were brought up, individual traumas that we might have encountered, not to mention things that might be um, in our genealogy, in our family, or in our culture, based on our sexual orientation, based on race, or gender, all these types of things. Those also have an impact on our nervous system and how we perceive the world, how we're interacting with it.
Yeah, I don't need you to explain the breathing, but I want to share with the listeners that I did listen to one of your podcasts on this. You call it the scope method.
Mm.
Um, and I will refer to that in the subject line here, people. And I would tell you to listen to it as an add-on because it's a great process to remember how to breathe correctly or use breathing.
Yeah, yeah. Scope something from somatic experiencing,
Uh-huh.
which is the work of Dr. Peter Levine, and it's a method for working with the nervous system to to regulate and I think get more into the natural flow of what the nervous system wants to do. So, just really to really simplify it, trauma, what we call trauma, is simply the nervous system getting overwhelmed. There's only so much energy that we can handle before the system goes, I got to shut down. This is too much. Right. And when that happens, um, the energy doesn't have anywhere to go. It ends up stuck in the body, and then we get triggered, or it gets reactivated by circumstances or emotions that we might be feeling. And it's not just the things that we think about as trauma. The car crashes or the war or maybe an assault, for instance, like things that you'd call a shock trauma. There's also, traumas that are happening because we didn't get our needs met, because we weren't validated or allowed to express our experience. Um, wild animals do this dance of the nervous system so much better than we do. There's a natural sort of if you look at the work of Dr. Stephen Porges and polyvagal theory, what we call the threat response system, right? If we go back to that snake situation, there's this startling, then there's that fight or flight, and hopefully it resolves from that. But if it doesn't, I'm going to get to a place where my system shuts down. Animals, you can see them shut down, like literally, like playing possum, or
Oh
the
yeah.
deer freezing in the headlights, right? Well, after that danger is over, animals are really, really great at discharging all that energy. Like they literally will get up and shake and then just go back to being themselves. Humans don't do that. We can, but most of us haven't been taught how to. And most of the programming in society is saying the exact opposite. It's saying, quit crying about that, move on, get over it. Right? Our experience is not being validated or supported, and therefore we end up in these situations where we're traumatized. So wild animals experience trauma; they don't get traumatized the way that human beings do.
That's very
And so
interesting.
so part of the breath work and part of things like somatic experiencing or other somatic modalities is helping the system go through that discharge uh, experience that maybe we've never had before. It's basically creating safety in the system so that the nervous system can unwind on its own. Whether that looks like literally trembling or shaking, or expressing the emotion that we never got to express. I all the time. I mean, I could talk about my own breath work, but definitely with clients, see them, go through big cathartic, crying, or, expressing anger, rage, fear, all these different emotional experiences that they never had a chance to experience in the moment. Sometimes because they were, concerned with their survival. Other times because the emotion wasn't safe to express. Right. I'm sure that that's an experience that many of us can relate to.
So when you do your breath work, do you
Oh,
do breath work sessions with people?
yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of one-on-one sessions, and also groups, and it really just kind of depends on, I think one thing that I really appreciate about breathwork is it's very, very flexible as far as a container. For instance, I have regular clients that breathe with me online.
Uh-huh.
I have other people that love to breathe with me in person. Uh, Typically those two groups feel like, sort of like, the people that breathe with me online, I tell them about these, I just went to this retreat. It was a week long. I did all these sessions. It was great. There was like 50 of us breathing in the room together. And they go, I don't know about that. That sounds like a lot. And then I'll go to these retreats and hey, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a breathwork facilitator. I do a lot of online breathwork. Oh, online breath work. How does that work? I don't think that I like that, right? So, um, I think there's a benefit to meeting people where they are, and that is a strength of the practice, is that we can do it in these different sets and settings uh, depending on our own preferences.
So when you talk about this holotropic, that's what it says here, the holotropic paradigm.
Hmm. Yeah.
What does that have a special focus?
Yeah. So the holotropic paradigm is really uh trusting in that inner healer, or that part of the psyche. We can call it the inner creator, like you did. But allowing for that process to unfold, to give ourselves sort of permission to move into these states. I would say one of the main differences between the altered state of breath work and the altered state of, say, mushrooms, is
Mhm.
that there's nothing helping us, right? It's just ourselves and our breath. And there is an element of permission. Sometimes when we're asking the ego part of ourselves to take a back seat for a while, that feels really scary. Our whole identity and sort of who we think of ourselves as people might be wrapped up in that ego mind. So, the idea of getting out of the way,
Yeah.
that's not always the easiest thing, right? Like, um, I think about myself, like one of the first experiences that I had, and then going to the art room afterwards. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I'm like judging myself for the art that I'm doing. Right. Like, I'm sure you experience
Yeah.
that in
Oh,
your retreats and with your clients as well, as like being that judger, that inner critic that's like, this isn't good. Like, I'm more of a musician. I can draw like some stick figures, but it kept me from doing that art, or being having art as part of the process for a few sessions. And it took me getting to the place where I could just sit there and say, you know what, there's nobody judging this but me. And if I just let the brush move, it's going to be perfect. Right?
right.
I can't do this wrong. Right? But
No.
that's a process. And so the holotropic paradigm is really, first of all, trusting in that process, trusting that there is something that we can connect to. And then how do we work with that? Part of the paradigm is this idea that we are all living, um, kind of on this horizontal axis of, that typically things are happening to me. Somebody cuts me off in traffic and it's something personal,
Right.
right? When I'm getting upset, it's like, how dare they? Right? Don't they know who I am? Or like, I'm in a hurry. When somebody says something to me and I get upset about it, like, there's, how dare they do this to me? And that part of the paradigm is the invitation to move from that horizontal axis into the vertical, right? And the vertical is everything that's happened to me in my biographical experience, everything in my life, but also this connection between myself and something that's greater, right? How am I connected to spirit or source, or however you want to interpret and connect with that yourself. And if I take that experience of feeling slighted or wronged or whatever emotion it is, and I take that internally and vertically and kind of sit with it, like, how does that transform? How does that help me to work with it? So it might be seeing, oh, I'll give you an example from my life. I'm the oldest of three kids. My sister came around when I was 2 years old. Um, there's still a part of me inside that 2 year old that feels threatened by having to share attention,
Mhm.
possessions, anything with somebody else. Now that doesn't mean that that's how I'm ruling my life, or that I'm letting that instinct run ramshot over me. But if I'm not careful, and if I'm already in a place where I'm stressed, tired, not doing my own inner work, and my partner, for instance, like, goes to take something off my plate while we're eating, I might get
Yeah.
really upset. And so rather than expressing that horizontally outwards, it's like the invitation to go inside and go, "Hey, what's going on in here?" Right? So I think that's another part of the model, is just uh, bringing in the accountability and the way to work with ourselves. And the bigger, more mysterious part is that there's this transpersonal aspect as well, right? The things that we can't explain by science or psychology. And that's something that people definitely experience in breath work, right? When we're in those holotropic states, time isn't moving linearly. Things can be happening at the same time. Like, people might have experiences of past lives. They might meet different deities, or avatars of different deities, or spirit animals, or meet their ancestors, um, or just the things that we think of about sort of the stereotypical psychedelic experiences: colors, shapes, downloads of information or insights, things like that. Those are all possible, as well, within the transpersonal. And
Uh,
there's def oh yeah, go for it. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, no, I love when you talk about this horizontal axis and this vertical axis, because
Mm,
I have a similar thing that I teach my artists. And for me, horizontal is based in time.
mm,
I use a color coding system, and it's either based, you're either in the past, you're thinking about something that happened to you in the past, or you're worried about something that's going to happen to you in the future, and you slide. But the middle point is green, and that's where you're just present. And then I love how you talk about going vertical, because presence is about how you connect right now in the moment. It's timeless. Like you just said,
right.
it's the timeless truth of who you are, but you have levels of receiving. And what gets in our way is, like you said, a belief system that someone is taking my food, or, someone is replacing me. Those, you have to do the work. So it's a matter of first being present to what you're doing. Like when you do the art room, when you go into the art room, be present to just to I'm right here and now, and I'm just going to focus on this paper. But then you have to start letting go of the, what does it matter if, what is important? Does any art really mean anything? Does it ever last? Because it doesn't. Ultimately,
Right.
all art comes and goes. Even the famous
Mm,
art, it might come around for a while, but
mhm.
sooner or later, something destroys it. So it's in that present moment. And that might be, what did you say, metaphysical, or what was that word you just used? It was so, um,
Transpersonal. Yeah.
Transpersonal. Trans the person, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Explain that a little
Right.
bit. What
Yeah, so transpersonal really is anything outside of what we can sort of explain through, through science, and modern psychology. For instance, for me, I've been practicing Buddhism for over 20 years. So if I'm in a visionary space and there's some sort of Buddha that appears, right? That makes sense to me. I can reason with that. I can go, well, you've got 20 years of work in this area. It makes sense that somehow subconsciously my brain is putting this image in front of me. But when I started doing this work, I started having visions and experiences of Shiva. And that kind of freaked me out because I'm like, I never cared about Shiva at all. It's not like I was reading, the Shiva Sutras or the Bhagavad Gita or anything like that. And in fact, the figure that started showing up in my experiences initially, I didn't even know it was Shiva. Like when I thought of Shiva, I thought of the dancing figure that you see in the statues. But initially, this figure that kept seeing was more of this warrior, and he had like this loincloth and this big spear. And at first he was like in the distance, I couldn't really make him out, but over time it kept getting clearer and clearer, and I didn't know exactly what it was. I wasn't really even focusing on it in the beginning. And then this one night, I had been out at a rave, and I came back, and I was laying on my bed, and I was listening to this song. And there was something in the song that was just like, it was like clicking. And it was like, hey, there's something here. There's something here. There's something here. And I Googled, because there was like a mantra in the song. And I Googled the mantra. What does this mantra mean? And the first thing that showed up was this image of Shiva, this different avatar that I had been seeing in these experiences. And it blew my mind, CJ. Like I was sitting there on the bed just weeping, listening to this mantra and like going, oh my God, this is the image that I keep seeing in these experiences. Um, so like that's one sort of aspect of the transpersonal. I've had breathwork experiences where I've gone back into traumatic experiences. Say like there was something that happened to me when I was 13, with my stepdad, like a physical assault. I've re-experienced that and kind of worked through that, and also through that experience realized how much of that I suppressed, and how sort of the next few years through through high school, how shut down I was because I had gone through this trauma and didn't realize it, and was just doing whatever I could to try to deal with it, try to survive. um, Recently, I had a breathwork experience recently during a retreat where I had, I guess the best way I could describe it is it was like a flip book, and every time the page turned, it was like a different past life. And
oh
so I was
wow.
seeing these similar experiences, but through these different past lives. For gosh, it felt like over an hour, and it was a really powerful experience, and one that I'm still kind of working on integrating, uh, because it really shook me up quite a bit. But one of the beautiful things I think about breathwork and about bringing this transpersonal aspect into it is the acceptance and the space for that. Like oftentimes my clients will come out of an experience and they tell me about it, and then they go, "What do you think that means?" And my response is always, "What do you think it means?"
Exactly.
Right? Like I don't know. Like I trust in your inner healer. I trust in your inner creator. And I think that my job as a facilitator is I trust in your inner creator until you trust in your inner creator. And how can I create the space to help you in that, in that nourishing and in that flourishing, so that one day you're as confident in it as I am.
So this is so interesting. So when you do the breath work,
Mhm.
I always think of breath work as calming, but do you get to a point where they're breathing in and out faster and faster, or where there
Yeah.
is a, yeah, is that what
Oh yeah.
happens?
Yeah, I mean, every session's different. For sure, there is an element of it with this type of breath work, right? That we're speaking about, the holotropic breath work, where it can look like a lot's happening, crying, yelling, screaming, moving around. There's an element of what we call body work, and it's not body work the way that we typically think of it. It's more like you could think of it as like a release work, where I can help you sort of with the resistance that's coming up in your body to work through it. So if you think about like tension, for instance, like if you were to tighten your whole body with the intention of relaxing, right? You're going to like tighten everything. It's going to build to this maximum and then release.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes when what comes up in breath work, the participant is having trouble moving through it on their own, and there's definitely things that we kind of encourage first, which is first of all like leaning in, like letting yourself be with the emotional state that's coming up, because typically we're doing the opposite of that when it's uncomfortable, right? We're like, let me, can I scroll on my phone or
Yeah.
grab a beer, or do something, to keep this emotion from being present. um we also encourage movement, and letting the body express through sound. These are all great portals to energy movement, but sometimes that doesn't work, or that's just not quite getting somebody there. And in that case, then the body work can come in, where say for instance, I have this, I'm feeling this pain in my shoulder, right? And I'll kind of, okay, show me where it is. Like put my hand where that pain is. And then I'll invite them to go back to the breath, and I'll just meet them with resistance. They can kind of push against me, and I'm just going to meet them with the resistance, and it builds and builds and builds until it releases on its own. So it's not that I'm doing body work on them. I'm just sort of giving them some extra support and resistance and encouragement to help them move through it.
And that would be a little challenging on a call, or no? I mean,
There's definitely ways that you can work with it. But yeah, I mean, it's it's an interesting thing. One of my mentors, Diana Medina, she said something to me earlier this year that's really stuck with me, which is, um, we have to feel safe enough to be unsafe. And so it's almost like when the subconscious knows that there's not enough safety, it's not going to bring up the material that is going to sort of overwhelm. So I'll give you an example for myself. Um, I mentioned going through this re-experiencing of this physical assault.
yeah.
I did hundreds of breathwork sessions before that came up. It's not like that energy was just buffered in the queue waiting for the first chance to like pop out. There was something about the set and setting of being on this retreat, having people that I knew were going to support me, because as soon as it started to happen, I knew exactly who I needed. Like I asked for the facilitator by name, and there was probably 4 or 5 facilitators there, and I said, "No, you need to go get this person." And I knew that and it was a male, right?
Uh,
So the only male facilitator, there was something there where I needed that corrective experience. Like as I was going through this trauma, like I needed to be held and supported by this like healthy, you know, calm, kind male, to sort
uh-huh.
of have the corrective experience of reversing this assault that was perpetrated by someone that should have been kind and supportive and not violating my trust or my physical safety. So I often think about that where I'm like, gosh, I've had hundreds of these experiences before that where this could have come out and be resolved or re-experienced or whatever it was. why why was it that day and time and specific session where it came out? So I do, I think the longer I've done this work, the more I do trust in the paradigm and in the inner healer, because I've watched people go into big processes without enough time to just write it off to, oh, they were just breathing. You know, every once in a while, there's someone I start to talk to them about breath work and they go, oh, well, so you're hyperventilating. So that's, of course, that can just, explain everything that you have been describing. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Like, yes, there is something physiological that's going on, right? Like, the research shows us, and I think you were talking about this with Cam, where when we access a non-ordinary state, the part of the brain that we call the default mode network gets less active, right? And because that's becoming less active, we can build new neurological pathways. We can see things from a new perspective. We can let go of the default mode that we're used to doing things through. That makes sense. I can explain that, right? I can explain that, well, gee, if I'm doing this breathing for between 20 minutes to an hour, that something physiological is happening. That I can explain. I can't explain when somebody takes 3 breaths and they're in that same state. I can't explain where they are going into process even before the breathing starts. How do you explain that unless there's something else that's operating on on an inner level? So the longer I do this work, the more I really trust in the model and in the, like I said, I trust in your inner healer until you trust in your inner healer. And that's
Well,
usually a process.
well, I definitely believe that there is a intelligence. I call it an intelligence of being
Mm,
that comes through us and is directing us towards our highest good. And
mm,
it's different for all of us. And that would
that's
explain
right.
why something triggers, like why in that one situation did you seek that healing? And because there was someone there that could provide it. And there's a guiding hand, but we have to get our little selves out of the way,
Right. That's
you
right.
know. And whether that's doing a dance, a Shiva dance, or whether it's breathing, or whether it's meditation, or or ayahuasca mushrooms, or whatever, ayahuasca or mushrooms, whatever it is, those are all tools. Those are
Right.
all tools. But the real tool is that power, right? That creative.
That's right. And that's, to me, that's what all these practices are pointing to, is like that we have this capacity within us. We don't need to give that power away to somebody else,
Right,
right? Like where does the inspiration for the art come from that you're creating? That's a beautiful mystical kind of experience. Like, out of all the thoughts and all the consciousness that you're having, here comes this art.
right.
I think about that with my brand or with my podcast. I'm like, wow, I have millions of thoughts going through my head all the time. Why did I pluck this one out and say, you know what? This is important. I think I'm gonna plant this in the ground and water it and see what grows. You
Well, I mean,
know?
why would I go to a therapy session, open up a book to a random page,
That's
and
right.
I mean, how does that happen?
That's
And
right.
you sit there and go, and some people say, well, your mind, your subconscious is direct, but how did my subconscious know what was on page 169 of this book? Do you know?
Yeah, that's right. The greatest thing about non-duality to me is if you believe that there's a synchronicity and that there's some higher meaning, you're absolutely right. And if you think it's just some random coincidence, you're right too.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. You're always right. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's very interesting. So one last question, because we're running out
Mm.
of time. So we talked about this yesterday, and you said that you have been a professional DJ. I don't know if you're still
Yeah.
doing that, doing music. Has this process opened up new creative passages for you? Have you gone backwards now and found that you're
Mm.
more open to being inspired to an instinctual movement, to an intuitiveness when you make music or plan a playlist?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, one of the things that I've done for the last 4-ish years is put together the music for breathwork, not only for myself but for other facilitators. And within holotropic breathwork in particular, and the neurodynamic breathwork as well, there's a specific sort of formula that the music goes through, and it supports the trajectory of the experience and kind of um, helps to hold the subconscious as the participants going through the experience. And yeah, I mean, the to me, I've brought in the 20 years of DJing experience into that. The way that do certain transitions, or just the ear that I have, and it's hard to describe, but there's something that started to happen to me after I was DJing, where there'll be this thing, I'll be listening to something, and then there's almost like an impulse where I'm like, "Oh, I know what goes with this. I know what comes next." And it's, I think, listening to that inner voice first and foremost of, "Oh, okay, if I get all of a sudden get this flash of inspiration that this song should come after the one I'm listening to, follow it, listen to it, see what happens." Um, the other thing, not to disparage any other facilitator, because we're all unique and we all have our own, uh, you know, gifts that we're bringing to this. But I think a lot of the older facilitators, they they don't have the experience that I have, as far as, b- different types of music, the way that the way that DJing has affected me and the way that I listen to music. In other words, I really enjoy a very progressive style of dance music, where the DJ is typically playing for a lot longer period of time. For instance, I just went to Denver a couple weeks ago and saw two of my favorite DJs, Sasha and John Digweed, who have been playing at a worldwide, top level for over 30 years. And they played for 5 hours straight. And so
Uh-huh.
there's something that happens where it's less of, hey, I've got an hour to try to like cram as much into this experience as possible. And with 5 hours, you can really tell a story. You can let things breathe. You can give it a lot more space. And that perspective, that way of, taking the listener on an emotional journey, where they do have the space to kind of go within, um, and connect to the music in a different way, is something that I bring into the my creative process when I'm working on music for breath work and for non-ordinary states.
So I heard this, I should tell you. I just heard this. And I don't know if you have done it yet, but that you might want to consider making your own songs, not just a playlist, but
Yeah,
making your own music. I just feel that that's and I'm hearing you go granular. I don't know whatever that means. Just
it's it's definitely happening. It's definitely something that is in a bigger picture, and right now it's something that I'm more in the play stage with. Like,
right.
um, there was an artist that, when I was producing a lot more music, I listened to his seminar and I really adopted his method. I really liked it, and he said, as a musician, you should have day sessions and night sessions. And the night sessions are strictly play, strictly creative. Don't worry about trying to write a song. Just jam. just doodle, just create, make
Right.
sounds, come up with ideas, and sort of stack those so that when you go into the day session, you can be much more linear and like much more like, okay, today in my day session, I'm going to create this song. And you're going to sit down and just be focused on writing the song. So very much in that night
I knew you were
stage
going to
of
say that.
play right
Yeah,
now.
that's great.
And some of it, to kind of go back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, has just been in the last couple of years. I went from, working in corporate finance and with analytics, to starting my own business, to being fully out on my own. And there's a lot that's involved in that, in being an entrepreneur and not having a paycheck that's coming in guaranteed every 2 weeks. Um, so there's been a lot more focus on building that in the last couple of years. And now that that's starting to stabilize, it's
Right.
definitely given me more space to start to be more creative and start to play more. So yes, it's
Yeah.
definitely coming.
Good. I can
Definitely
hear
in
it.
the works.
It is
Yeah,
coming. You just tell little Jonathan to step aside because your higher
that's right.
Jonathan is going to start creating. So, well,
Absolutely.
this has been a great interview, and it explains a lot to me, that a lot more than I expected. Is there anything else you want to share with the listeners? Like, I know you do these sessions online. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I would say the best place to connect with me is through my SKOL community at SKOL. I have a community there. It's free to join, and you can connect to all the different services. We do online breath work together. There's meditation, and I'll have some new courses that are coming up for 2026 as well. So it's Blue Magic Alchemy on SKOL, or really Blue Magic Alchemy wherever you find me, YouTube or Instagram, anywhere. Um, so yeah, if you're curious and you want to learn more, that's the place to go. Blue Magic Alchemy on SKOL.
Okay. Wow. So you're on YouTube also, and you have
Yep.
your podcast. Your podcast is called The
Yeah.
Vital Point, which I just followed you, by the way, on Spotify.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a lot in there, and I love I'm going on a trip to Santa Fe soon, and I'll be listening to you. So.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being on the show and reaching out. It's been great.
Yeah.
Listeners, just remember all these sources here on this channel, YouTube. Follow me, follow Jonathan, because he has some really incredible interviews that I've already fallen in love with. Remember, my new book, Spiritual Parable, is out on Amazon, and it's a way to align yourself to connect with that creative intelligence, that higher power. And we don't do that by sitting in fear. We don't do that by sitting in judgment. We have to just be present and in a state of love, I think, in a state of love. So
Mm.
thank you for following the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Go out there and be creative. Talk to you soon. Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.